Welcome to another episode of Shadows of the Tarot. The phone rang, jolting Elise from her thoughts. She picked it up, and Tammy's voice came through, urgent and anxious. "Elise, have you been online today? There's a thread about you blowing up on social media." Elise frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Someone has been connecting your tarot readings to a string of unexplained deaths. They're saying it's not just a coincidence." Elise let out a sharp laugh. "That's ridiculous, Tammy. You don't actually believe that, do you?" "I don't know what to believe," Tammy admitted. "But people are talking, and it's spreading fast." Elise exhaled, rubbing her temple. "This isn't the first time I've heard something like this. A detective came to see me a few months ago." "A detective?" Tammy's voice sharpened. "Why? What did he want?" "He was investigating the death of some guy named Ty. He died in his bathtub, electrocution." There was a pause before Tammy spoke again, her voice lower now, almost hesitant. "Elise, Ty isn't the only one. There have been more deaths. A lot more. And every single one of them had a tarot reading with you before they died." "I looked into it, Tammy, and it's all just a coincidence," Elise said firmly. Tammy scoffed. "That's a lot of coincidences, Elise. They were accidents. They have nothing to do with the cards." "I'm not so sure," Tammy said, her voice laced with unease. "I think you should stop. Stop the readings. Stop using those cards altogether. Get another deck, something new. Just stop using that one." Elise sighed. "Tammy, they're just cards." "But are they?" Tammy pressed. "Do we even know where they came from? I've never seen a deck like yours before. They look ancient, and if they're antiques, who knows what kind of energy they carry? What if they were cursed or something?" "Oh, come on," Elise groaned. "You sound ridiculous." "Please, Elise," Tammy pleaded. "Just stop using them." Elise hesitated before exhaling sharply. "Fine. I'll switch decks for a while. We'll see if that changes anything." Tammy let out a breath. "Thank you. This whole thing is ridiculous," Elise muttered. "If the cards were the problem, don't you think people would stop coming to me?" Tammy hesitated. "They're not going to stop coming, Elise." Elise frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tammy's voice dropped, suddenly serious. "People aren't just coming to you for guidance anymore. They're asking questions about people they want to get rid of." Elise froze for a moment before shaking her head. "Oh, don't be absurd. I'm serious. Think about it." "Forget it," Elise snapped. "I'll stop using the cards. End of discussion." Tammy exhaled. "Good. Thank you. So can we drop this now?" Elise asked, irritation creeping into her voice. Tammy paused, then relented. "All right." A beat of silence passed before she added, almost casually, "I'm still going to keep reading that thread though." Later that day, Elise's phone rang again. This time, the caller wasn't a friend, it was a reporter. The woman on the other end introduced herself in an eager tone. She wanted to interview Elise about the eerie pattern surrounding her tarot readings. The connection between her cards and the string of unexplained deaths had stirred public curiosity, and the media had taken notice. Elise felt a flicker of excitement. She enjoyed attention, the thrill of being talked about. The idea that people were fascinated by her and her readings was intoxicating. This wasn't just gossip, it was publicity. And publicity meant more clients, more opportunities, and more power in her craft. Without hesitation, she agreed to the interview. This could be her moment, the step-up she had been waiting for. Her name would spread across social media, her client list would grow, and soon, she'd be in demand for more interviews, more exposure. Yet, in the back of her mind, a small voice nagged at her. The cards weren't hers originally. Tammy had given them to her. And Tammy had been insistent, practically begging her to stop using them. Elise wasn't superstitious, but she couldn't completely ignore the unease in her friend's voice. So, as a compromise, she set the antique tarot deck aside. She switched to another set, one she had used in the past. But as she flipped the familiar cards in her hands, something felt off. The readings weren't the same. The energy was different, muted, almost dull. And though she wouldn't admit it out loud, she missed the old cards. Elise felt the pull of the antique deck. It lingered in the back of her mind, whispering to her, tempting her. Night after night, the nightmares came. She was running, always running, through a dense forest, the crackling roar of fire chasing her, licking at her heels. Every time, the flames crept closer, their blistering heat nearly tangible even after she jolted awake. Her skin would be damp with sweat, her breath ragged, her heart pounding against her ribs. If the nightmares had been occasional, she might have brushed them off. But they weren't. They came every single night since she had stopped using the cards. Sleep became something she dreaded, a battleground where she fought an unseen force. Still, she resisted. She continued her readings with a different deck, determined to prove, to herself, to Tammy, to whoever or whatever was behind the nightmares, that the cards weren't controlling her. But something was missing. Some clients noticed it too. They had seen the antique deck in photos online, heard the rumors, and they weren't satisfied with the substitute. A month passed. The nightmares only worsened. The fire was no longer just behind her. It was reaching for her, searing the edges of her vision, making her wake up gasping for air as if she had truly been engulfed in flames. It was wearing her down, leaving her exhausted, sickly. Then one day, a client arrived with a peculiar request. They insisted she use the antique deck. They wouldn't take no for an answer. "I'll pay triple," they said. Elise hesitated, but not for long. She retrieved the deck, its weight familiar in her hands, its presence almost electric. As soon as she spread the cards out, a sense of ease settled over her. The reading went flawlessly. The energy, the connection, it was undeniable. That night, for the first time in weeks, she slept peacefully. She dreamt of sunlight and wildflowers, of soft grass beneath her bare feet. She was running again, but this time she wasn't fleeing, she was free. The dream led her to the same forest, but it had changed. No fire, no fear. Only warmth, joy, an overwhelming sense of belonging. When she awoke, she understood. The cards weren't just part of her readings. They were part of her. They demanded to be used. And as long as she obeyed, they rewarded her. The deaths? She could live with them. Besides, were they really random at all? She had read for herself countless times. Nothing had ever happened to her. Tammy had arranged to meet Elise for coffee, wanting to catch up and see how she was doing. Elise had moved recently and was eager to show off her new apartment. It was a sleek, modern space in the heart of the city, part of an upscale high-rise known as the Towers. The move symbolized her success. Her readings had brought in more than enough money to upgrade her lifestyle. But there was something weighing on her. Elise knew she had to tell Tammy the truth. She was back to using the antique tarot deck. But how would she explain it? How would Tammy react? Before heading out, Elise did what she did best. She consulted the cards. As she shuffled, she focused on Tammy, on their conversation to come, on the uncertainty twisting inside her. The first card revealed the future, success. That much made sense. Her business was thriving, her reputation growing. But the present? The card she pulled unsettled her. It signified destruction, a crumbling foundation. That didn't add up. Everything had been going well, or so she thought. Elise took a deep breath and drew the final card from the antique deck. The Tower. She stared at it, her pulse quickening. The Tower was a card of upheaval, of sudden chaotic change. It warned of shattered illusions, forced transformation, and the destruction necessary for rebirth. It was about confronting hard truths, whether one was ready for them or not. The meaning unsettled her. Did it refer to her relationship with Tammy? To something bigger? She traced the edges of the card with her fingertips, considering its message. An unbalanced personality. A devastating loss. A stressful scenario that forces growth. The necessity of overcoming challenges. Elise exhaled slowly. Maybe this was a sign that telling Tammy the truth was the right move. That honesty, however difficult, would ultimately lead to something better. Or maybe it was a warning. Either way, she had made up her mind. She would tell Tammy. She owed her that much. Tammy arrived late that evening, apologizing as she stepped inside. Sorry, I had dinner with my parents first. Took longer than I expected. That's okay, Elise said with a smile. Come in, I saved dessert for you. They settled in with coffee and cake, chatting about the usual, work, family, the small things that made up their lives. It felt normal, easy. But Elise knew the conversation would shift soon. And it did. So, Tammy said, setting down her cup. How are the readings going with the new deck? Elise hesitated, then decided there was no point in avoiding it. Tammy. I went back to using the antique deck. Tammy's expression darkened instantly. Elise, why? The nightmares, Elise admitted. They were unbearable. Every night, fire chasing me, getting closer. I could barely sleep. But the moment I used the antique deck again, they stopped. Tammy's lips pressed into a thin line. Of course they stopped. Elise, those cards are cursed. They're evil. Don't you see what's happening? They're controlling you, manipulating you into using them. She leaned forward, voice urgent. We have to get rid of them. Give them to me. We need to burn them. Elise's breath caught in her throat. Burn them. The word sent a sharp panic through her. Fire, the very thing she had been running from in her dreams. The thought of destroying the cards made her stomach twist. She couldn't do it. No, she wouldn't do it. The cards were part of her now, as familiar and comforting as old friends. She couldn't let anything happen to them. Tammy reached for the tin that held the cards, but the moment her fingers touched it, she gasped and dropped it. The tin clattered to the floor, landing against her foot. Tammy winced, clutching her toe. Ow! Damn it! She pulled her foot back, and Elise's eyes widened as a bruise instantly bloomed at the base of Tammy's big toe. Oh my God, Tammy, I'm so sorry. Elise rushed to the freezer and grabbed a bag of frozen peas, handing it to her. Here, put this on it. Tammy's face was pale. Elise. I swear, that tin was burning hot. I had to drop it. Elise swallowed hard, retrieving the cards and placing them back on the shelf with careful hands. She forced a smile. Just leave them there for a minute. Tammy shot her a wary look, but said nothing. Come on, Elise said, opening the balcony door. Let's get some fresh air. Tammy hesitated, then nodded, stepping outside. The cool night air wrapped around them, but Elise couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. And for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, Tammy was right. We need to think this through, Elise said, pouring Tammy a glass of wine. They stepped onto the balcony, letting the cool night air settle around them. The city stretched out before them, a sea of lights flickering against the darkness. Elise took a deep breath, hoping to ease the tension hanging between them. Tammy, she said carefully, you know there's no real connection between these accidental deaths and my cards. Tammy turned to her sharply. But there are links, Elise. The fact that people are dying after you give them a reading, that is a link. Elise shook her head, exhaling in frustration. Tammy pressed on. You would think people would stop coming to you, right? But they don't. You know why? Because they believe something else is happening. Some of them think if they get a reading while focusing on someone, that person will die. And then you've got the absolute lunatics, the ones coming to you because they want to test it. Or worse, because they want to die. Elise stared at her, unsettled by the way she said it. Tammy gestured back toward the apartment. And look at what just happened to me. I barely touched that tin, and it felt like it was burning hot. I had to drop it. Those cards are dangerous, Elise. Elise crossed her arms, gripping her own skin as if to ground herself. Tammy's voice softened slightly but remained firm. Listen to me. You need to get rid of them. Not tomorrow, not next week, tonight. She took a shaky breath. You don't even have to touch them. Use tongs, anything. Just burn them. Before it's too late. Elise's fingers twitched at her sides. The mere thought of flames consuming the cards made her stomach churn. The fire in her dreams. The heat she could feel even after waking. And the unshakable, terrifying thought that if she burned the cards, she might burn with them. Elise looked at Tammy and smiled. No, Tammy, we have to get rid of you. The words weren't her own. They came from somewhere else, something else. Before she could even process the thought, her body moved on its own. With an almighty push, she shoved Tammy over the balcony railing. A scream, a flash of movement, then silence. For a brief moment, it was as if Elise had stepped outside of herself. Like a passenger in her own body, watching from a distance. The sensation was fleeting, but when it passed, her hands were still outstretched, fingers trembling. Her breath came in short gasps as reality snapped back into focus. Tammy was gone. A sickening dread coiled in Elise's stomach as she instinctively stepped forward and peered over the edge. Far below, on the pavement, Tammy's body lay twisted, unnatural. A dark stain spread beneath her, seeping into the cracks of the concrete. Elise staggered back, her heart slamming against her ribs. What have I done? Tammy, her best friend. The only person who had ever truly cared about her. And now she was just gone. But then another thought slithered into her mind, wrapping around her panic like a cold embrace. It was the only way. Tammy had wanted to destroy the deck. The cards, her closest friend, had been in danger. Elise had done what was necessary. The thought settled her. It made sense. But how was she going to explain this? Panic surged again as she rushed to the elevator, slamming the button repeatedly until the doors finally opened. The ride down felt endless. When she stepped out onto the pavement, her legs felt unsteady, her body disconnected from her mind. Tammy lay there, lifeless. People were already gathering, their voices hushed and horrified. Elise fumbled for her phone and called the police. Her fingers felt numb as she spoke, her voice barely registering her own words. When the authorities arrived, they wasted no time. Paramedics checked for signs of life, but it was useless. Tammy was pronounced dead on arrival. Then came the questions. The investigation. And just like before, the detective came sniffing around her door, watching her with quiet suspicion. But this time, there was no tarot deck to be found. Elise had been careful. Yet, she saw it in the detective's eyes. He didn't believe this was an accident. And soon, the forensic team arrived to comb through the scene. They examined the railing, the trajectory of the fall, the way Tammy's body had landed. It was only a matter of time before they figured it out. Elise wasn't sure whether to be afraid or excited. Elise had lied. Of course she had. The truth was, Tammy had been pushed. And yet, it was as if something, or someone, was protecting her. Before the investigation could gain momentum, evidence started to vanish. First, the security footage from the tower's cameras mysteriously corrupted. Then, forensic reports went missing. Witness statements turned vague, details blurred, and soon, it was as if Tammy's fall had never been anything but a tragic accident. With no solid proof, the police had nothing. Detective Eddie was seething. He had finally gotten her, finally had the chance to put an end to all these unexplained deaths. He knew Elise was involved, that she was at the center of something far darker than mere coincidence. But now, with nothing concrete to hold against her, his hands were tied. For now. but he wasn't letting her out of his sight. Eddie had always suspected the cards were evil, cursed in some way. But after tonight, he knew something else, something far worse. Elise wasn't just a victim of those cards. She was vicious too. Remember to like, subscribe, and share to others, so you don't miss an episode.